Hello, everybody. This is Zeus Caraval from ZK Research, and I'm back for another ZKast video podcast. And as always, this ZKast is done in conjunction with my partner, eWEEK. I'm alongside my co-host here, Mark Reed Edwards, who's in the New England area, as you can tell from his background. And although, Mark, that's a virtual background, I can tell a little bit. I don't think that looks a whole lot different than what your actual yard looks like, does it?
Well, it looks a little better because I snowblowed and the street is cleared. There's
Yeah.
snow everywhere.
Yeah, now I escaped New England just in time, and I actually escaped the cold in the Bay Area just in time. And if you want to have a quick look at where I am, you can see the beach and the sunny skies here. So I'm in lovely Honolulu, in actual Waikiki itself. I'm roughing it actually at the Ritz-Carlton here. So one of the restaurants is closed. So lots of big problems here.
How can you stand it? I mean, you're going to have
Well,
to complain to the manager, right?
yeah, we all have to do our part.
So, a lot of stuff up this week. Do you want to start with Arista beefing up its security offering?
Yeah, we've got kind of an interesting cat. By the way, it's all purple day too. I noticed with your shirt too. So, the ones we're going to talk about today, this theme of network and security coming together was never more evident this week. I think these two domains have been on a collision course now for years, and it's never really, we've talked more about it than it's actually happened. I remember writing about this at Yankee Group, that networking and security would come together, and it didn't really. I think what's driving it together now, you could say the pandemic, but this would have happened without it. But it's really the world's become network centric. When you think of all the digital transformation initiatives companies go through, IoT, mobility, cloud, things like that, they're all network centric paradigms, right? So almost by definition, the network plays a more important role. So we live in this world that's more dynamic and more distributed, and so you can't securing things, from the endpoint or from the app has some limitations. And I think the best way to do it is from the network. Now, Arista, who um, everyone knows Arista as a high performance network vendor, they've dabbled in the security space. In fact, they bought a company called eWEEK Security last year, but that was an analytic platform, and that was really a security tool that was used by network professionals, right? So it used a lot of network data to infer security things. What they announced with their macro segmentation service is really their first security tool. I think that would be used by security pros. Now they already had a macro segmentation service that included something called MSS Firewall, in which they partnered with Fortinet and Palo Alto and companies like that. They also had something called MSS Host, which partnered with VMware, but this is something called MSS Group, which extends that MSS family into like cloud and IoT areas. So the MSS software, their macro segmentation service software, works with their Cloud Vision management tool to provide network-wide visibility, orchestration, telemetry, things like that, from the data center all the way to the campus. Now, one of the challenges that segmentation has had historically is that when you segment the data center, that's done by one team. And when you segment your IoT area, that's done by another team. When you segment the cloud, that's done by another team. And so what you have now is all these different policies to manage these different environments. And just for those of you who don't really understand what segmentation is, it's the ability to carve your network into virtual zones. And so from a very simple example, in an office building, you would want to create a guest segment and a worker one, right? And so if you're on the guest network, then you can't really see what's going on with the employee side. Now, that was historically done with VLANs, and VLANs is a lot of work, right? If you can do 10, 20 VLANs, it's not a lot of work. But when you have to start thinking about different domains, and you have to start thinking about like thousands of devices and things, or tens of thousands, it is a lot of work. The other problems that VLANs have is it's done at the network layer. And so if I create a segment that says all my healthcare devices have to be in one zone, and I move the healthcare device, then I got to reprogram the VLAN to tell it now that this port on the network has to be segmented. With segmentation tools, it's done at the device level. And so the policy follows the device. And so if I have this healthcare, all these healthcare devices have to be in their own zone, and I go ahead and move it, then the policy actually follows that. And so what the Arista announcement does is it allows a company to set one set of policies and that through CloudVision and then push that out across all their different zones, be it cloud, be it IoT, be it campus, or be it data center. And I think that creates a much more scalable offering. And for Arista, I think this is important as well. They already have the lion's share of market and thought leadership, and with web scale companies, they've been slowly moving to the enterprise space, actually pretty quickly moving to the enterprise space. And I think what this does is it gives them a really solid security product to address that coming together of security and networking. And they've already got Wi-Fi and things like that. So this was a good announcement for them.
And keeping up on this network and security theme, Cisco and App Dynamics have kind of blended their security teams and developers.
Yeah. So AppD, as it's known, was Cisco's $3.7 billion application of an app management suite. And I know when Cisco bought it, people like, why is Cisco buying an app management suite? And I know if you recall back to Cisco Live, Chuck Robbins sort of gave the lay of the land, and these are the 5 principles for Cisco. And one of them was applications reimagined. If you think about what's happened to applications, is they're decomposed today, where you're picking up bits of application from different clouds, public clouds, private clouds. And so now Cisco's actually built their secure application software natively into App Dynamics, and this drastically changes security and application performance. Historically, when you think of the way application security worked, it was almost at odds of application performance. People would shut off security things because it made your apps perform slower, right? And so there's always been this trade-off. Do I want better performance or do I want better security? And I think companies had to pick between the two. With AppD actually having Cisco Secure built into it, now you don't have to make that trade-off, right? And so I think this becomes increasingly important as companies start to feel the strain of having their workers now work from home, and they're extended into remote locations, they're extended into their homes. Being able to monitor application performance, whether you're in a remote location, where you're getting your apps from the cloud or hybrid or on-prem locations, gets increasingly difficult. And so AppD is, when you look at even Gartner's MQ, they are the best-in-class app performance tool. But now with the built-in security, it gives companies the ability to, bring those two worlds together. And so no more trade-off of having to choose performance and apps. And I think it's another good example of how, this world of apps and networking and security, this is all coming together. And this is gonna have kind of a profound impact on IT as they look at how to structure things, because these independent silos that we've had so long need to go away.
Just the inconvenience of security that is often the reason why there are incidents that you read about in the paper, because it was just not convenient to use security because it slowed the machine down or something like that.
Yeah, well, I'm a former IT person, and I can tell you, in full disclosure, right, when I was in IT, I would often turn security things on my computer off because it was getting in the way and making things slow.
Now, wasn't that back in the mainframe days, though?
Actually, I started my career in the mainframe, but I was never a mainframe guy. I was one of the people that displaced all the mainframe people. But it was funny back then because it shows how things changed, because IBM was the dominant mainframe vendor. And I was brought in as a team of people to really bring Wintel, right, the Windows Intel PCs, and our IBM people wanted the IBM microchannel machines. And the thought back then is you never got fired for buying IBM, but I think you would have got fired for buying IBM then. So.
Exactly. So how about Fortinet? A couple of things on that front. They've updated their SASE and they announced quarterly results. So what's your view on that?
Fortinet's they don't get the same kind of high profile following as like Palo Alto does. They very quietly execute. They reported their Q4 20 results after the market closed last night, and the company delivered just another monster quarter. Their billings grew about 20%. APAC was up 23%. EMEA was up 22%. The revenue accelerator was 20%. Product grew 20%. Right, so everything's 20% there. Management attributed a lot of the growth to SD-WANs. And this is SD-WANs and the shift to SASE is another example of how networking and security has come together. So historically, the network vendors provided network connectivity, and the security vendors provided network security. And today with SASE, it's all come together. And so every network vendor is a SASE vendor, and every security vendor is a SASE vendor. And so now those two are in a collision course. And Fortinet has, and for all the ballyhoo that all the other vendors get, Fortinet has quietly been building a best-in-class SASE solution. In fact, there's a managed service provider that I have a lot of respect for out of Texas called Masergy. They do extensive testing. Hughes also is the same. They do extensive testing on the different products that they use to deliver their services, and both of them have told me for the price point that you get, Fortinet is absolutely best in class. And one of the things that Fortinet's always done well, I think, is they build their own silicon. And this is a little bit of a throwback to the old world where today lots of vendors say you have to do everything in software. But because they build their own silicon, they can deliver the same features at a very reasonable price point across their whole product line. So every one of their security products has what they call a security processing unit in it. And and I've talked to John Madison, their CTO, about this, and he's described it as when you think of your general purpose processor, right? It does a certain number of things well, but when you need specialized functions, like consider with graphics, any gamer will tell you a GPU does graphics better than a CPU because it's designed for that. It also does AI better because it's designed for that. Similarly, security is very processor intensive. And so an SPU is going to do security better than a CPU, right? It's the same analogy. And so Fortinet makes their own. And so because of that, they get just tremendous price performance. They also have their latest 40 OS release coming out, which again, is the software across all their products. And you'll see, I think they have like over 400 new features coming. They're also getting big into 5G, which we can talk about at a different time. But I think Fortinet's done an outstanding job of almost staying under the radar and building just a great SD-WAN and SASE product. And I think this is, you're going to see this company being one of the market leaders in the space.
And it seems to me that there is a trend toward custom silicon, right? So Fortinet's doing it. Apple has created silicon for their new line of Macs because they know what these devices need to do, right? So they build the silicon to do that.
Yeah, and this is something where it's not, we in the industry we like to swing pendulums wildly one way or the other, right? And so now we're in this everything must be done in software, but there are certain functions best done in hardware, best done in silicon, and best done in software, right? And so when it comes to heavy packet processing, deep packet inspection, data forwarding and stuff like that, that stuff's always been done better in silicon, and Cisco spins their own silicon, and I think the companies that do have always maintained a bit of a first mover performance edge. Now, you do need to do it in volume, right? So if I'm only selling a couple hundred units, it's too expensive to create my own silicon. If I'm selling millions of units, now I can get the price point down to about 30, 40 bucks. Where if you think a high-end Intel processor is like 2,000, so you can see right away where that price performance comes from, right? So at scale, nothing performs better than custom silicon. And you're right, that's one of the reasons Apple's doing it. They can just get much better performance than they can out of an Intel processor.
And they can design their machines now around that silicon, and the software can do exactly what they want it to do. And
it has battery life advantages.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is the battery life on these new M1 Max is supposed to be amazing.
Yeah, it's I upgraded mine a couple years ago, so now I guess I'll have a third $6,000 laptop, right? So Apple's really good at that, though.
But we were talking about scale a moment ago, and talk about scale. Amazon, is there another business that is scaled in 20 odd years to the size that it is at now? And it's going to say goodbye, at least in the CEO role, to Jeff Bezos, who's going to be replaced by Andy Jassy. But it's an interesting move. The really fast growing part of Amazon has been AWS, and that's where Jassy has been for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, I don't remember even who the last head of AWS Cloud was, right? And Andy Jassy's done a tremendous job. Yeah. And Andy, I've seen a lot of interviews with Andy, and I've talked to Andy at the AWS conferences and stuff, and he's learned a lot from Jeff. He said that he's and I think one of the reasons why they've maintained this leadership position over Azure and Google is they listen to their customers and they almost reverse engineer their products for customer problems. Where I've had customers tell me they've had Google in or something, and Google just assumes everybody wants to run IT like Google, right? And and then when they don't, they're sort of perplexed. Where Amazon will let customers run IT like they want, and they'll build their solutions for it. Also, AWS has been the best cloud provider. It's a weird thing in that they have all these optimization services, and so they can tell you where you're spending too much on AWS, right? So they'll look at, say, how you're storing all your stuff, and they'll tell you, well, you haven't used this content in 2 years, but yet you've got it on tier one storage. Move it down to tier two storage, and you'll save X number of dollars. And so they're almost, you could look at those optimization services taking money out of their pocket. But what happens is, by Amazon providing you those services, you trust them, and you actually wind up spending more. So their ability to help you continually optimize IT within the Amazon environment has been, one of their strengths, and I think that's the thing that's kept them out in front. And also, Mark, I think when you talk about scale, it's sort of an interesting dilemma for the entire rest of the industry, because the reason Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are able to build their clouds as big as their sell the types of service they do at the price they do is because they built out this cloud infrastructure for other things. Amazon for e-commerce, Google for search, Microsoft for Bing, right? And I don't see how an IBM or somebody like that could match that kind of scale, because they don't have another way to monetize the cloud, right? Where this is almost, Amazon completely monetizes their business off of e-commerce, and then all the AWS cloud stuff is gravy. But I think Andy Jassy's a tremendously smart guy. I think, I think him being promoted into that role as CEO of all of Amazon shows how important AWS cloud is. In fact, Amazon is always the first user of AWS cloud things, right? They
Right.
launched their Connect contact center last year, right? That's used by the Amazon contact center. Before Connect came around, people said, well, you really can't scale a cloud contact center past a few thousand seats. Well, guess what? They got 70,000 agents, right? So I think they're always the proof point for what's possible. And I think you see that linkage become tighter. So I don't think there's a spin-off of AWS cloud coming unless they're forced to from an antitrust perspective. But I think that would be a mistake. It's not their fault that nobody else they knew how to change their businesses. So I would find it funny when the government imposes that. It's like Toys R Us went into business. Well, it's not Amazon's fault. They didn't know what to do with their business, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are competitors in the space. They're just not doing as well as Amazon is.
Yeah, I think Amazon's share in business cloud is more than Azure and Google combined. In fact, the only comparable, when you look at market share numbers, the only comparable um, cloud provider to them is the others category, which shows how fragmented it is actually. Because once you get
Yeah.
past, once you get past Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Baidu, Tencent, or whatever, then they all become small. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a transition that's not going to happen until the third quarter. So it'll be
Yeah.
something we'll be talking about for a while, I would think.
Yeah, and it is, and I think this shift to online shopping and the use of Amazon that the pandemic really, it was already strong. Now every time I go, to down to the dumpster or something, I see, where I live is 200 Amazon boxes all, stacked on the
Right.
floor. That's going to continue. I think we've all gotten used to this, and it's too convenient to not use it. Plus, when I'm in San Mateo, I can order things that morning, and at like 5 o'clock it shows up. It's like it's it's the convenience factor is unparalleled.
Amazon as a platform is kind of an interesting development, where instead of putting up your own e-commerce store or, using Shopify or something like that, just use Amazon because
Yeah.
they've got the scale. So even for a large retailer, it makes sense. Don't fight them, just join them.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of retailers that always worry if I put my platform on Amazon, then they're going to steal my data or whatever. First of all, Amazon forgets in a day what most retailers know, right? We'll learn in a lifetime, right? So let's
Yeah.
not be so arrogant to think that you're going to outsmart Amazon. And you're right, you get the scale and the performance capabilities and things is second to none there. And so, we can. It's been tremendous watching Amazon since Bezos founded that company. I remember when I was at Alex Brown and Ferris Baker Watts when Amazon first went public, people questioned whether this company could ever make money, right? And this was a company that went from selling, remember, they were selling books online,
Well, do you
right?
remember the website EFT Company? And that was basically invented to track Amazon's demise. And there were lots of other .com companies that it tracked, but it was kind of, Amazon was talked about in the business press that, it's got 3 months of capital left or
Yeah.
whatever it was, because they were just spending money to gain market share. And look where they are 20 years later.
Yeah, their market cap growth has been, even once they passed $1 trillion. But I don't actually know where this stops. People have asked me. It's like $1 trillion, three. I don't know. They're gonna their market cap will be greater than. In fact, if you look at maybe the top 2 or 3 companies, they might be greater than the rest of the stock market combined, right? So,
Right.
it's had a funny kind of impact on the stock market too, though, Mark, because when Trump used to talk about the markets doing well, it's a handful of companies doing well that so disproportionately skew the Dow that Caterpillar can put up phenomenal numbers or bad numbers and nobody knows because
Yeah.
because these companies are so overweighted now, and
Yeah.
Amazon's really led that charge. And they changed the world, right? They literally changed the world.
Yeah.
And so, thanks, Jeff, for the memories, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Andy Jassy does.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be fun.
Anyways, I think that brings us to the end of our time here. Mark, one last thing, final Super Bowl prediction that happens in actually, by the time this posts, we'll have known the results. So,
Yeah. So what do you want to say? I think that Tom Brady is going to win this. And I was looking at some of the previous Patriots games, and most of them were squeakers. And I think this one might be a 3-pointer too. I think that, there may be a field goal late, and that's how they win.
yeah, I think whoever has the ball last wins. I said in my Norman Rice interview yesterday that I thought the old man would do it. And the only exception would be is if he scores too early and leaves like 90 seconds, then the
Right.
Chiefs could win. But then if they score and then leave 30 seconds, then the Bucks could win. So I think,
But
I do think it's going to come down to who has the ball last.
but as Bill Parcells always used to say, that's why they play the games,
That
fellas.
is why they play the game. Well, so anyways, we'll know if we're right or not by the time this airs. And so, thanks everybody for watching. Click to subscribe. Thanks.